If you walk into the home and it smells like dog shit, it doesn't matter if you're priced 2% below market value.
As well. If it smells like and looks like dog shit, then you're not at market value if that's how you're pricing.
Yeah.
Right.
Welcome to episode 314 of the Real Estate Podcast. Today we're talking about how to strategically price your home for sale. You won't want to miss this. Let's go.
Welcome to the Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for raw, unfiltered stories and expert tips. Whether you're a buyer, seller, tenant, landlord, or realtor, join us as we dive into the world of real estate.
Well, hello, sir. Welcome back.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a while.
Yeah, well, Adrian's on vacation, and you are my go-to when he's away.
Cool.
Which I quite like. So let's get right into it. We're not going to talk a lot about fluff today. We're going to get right to the topic because I think it's very relevant in the current real estate world, in our real estate world anyway. And that's about pricing your home. Mm-hmm. Why did I want to talk about this? There are a crap ton of listings available for sale right throughout the country, but specifically in the province of Ontario and even more specifically in the Greater Toronto area.
In our target area, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of listings out there. Mm-hmm. And you see a lot of different reasons for those listings being on the market. You've got people that haven't purchased another property yet, and they're just listing their home because they want to try and sell it. You've got people that have to sell because the mortgage rates are much higher than when they originally signed up.
Mm-hmm. Even with the reductions.
Reductions. Yeah. You've got people that want to downsize. You've got people that want to upsize. Like there's a whole lot of mismatch of, and then you've got 100 and something thousand realtors, which we all know that saying 95% of the deals are done by the top 5% of realtors. But you've got realtors doing a terrible job on some of these listings, mm-hmm. and listings are sitting longer and longer and longer. So, go ahead.
So, bang on. I had a conversation, I think it was with Steve, a couple of weeks ago on how challenging it is right now. Something we do is, comparative market analysis when you're pricing a home or when you're doing, adding value to potential people, what's my home worth? It's so difficult right now for those reasons that you stated. The same home could be underpriced, could be overpriced. Like there's such a swing right now, twofold. The reason why people are selling, but also the realtors not understanding the market and how to price a home, because the variability right now I think is huge, which makes it very difficult for those of us that are trying to do it properly, non-subjectively. Yeah. It's really, really tough right now because there is that, massive range as you talk about.
How many times have you heard me say that you have to have intimate knowledge of not only the home, mm-hmm. but the market that you're selling that home in?
100%.
So
lots.
Some of our insider knowledge here, giving you the key to the KT kind of script.
Open the kimono.
Open the kimono. When we sit down with a seller, it's a conversation. We call it a conversation. Mm-hmm. It's not a presentation.
It's a listing conversation.
It's a listing conversation. We're going to talk about what's important to them, what their needs are, what do they want from the realtor that they are hiring. Of course, we're going to go over what we do to represent them and what we do to represent the property. In fact, we produced a great video, which you can see on our Instagram, which we talk exactly about what we do and the process of what we do to list your home. But in that conversation, one of the most important things that gets discussed in that 60 minutes or so is the price, right? Like every seller wants to know, okay, Steve, that's great, but what is my house
What's
worth?
my house worth?
Yeah. So we're going to talk today a little bit about our 3-price approach. And I think this is a great thing to talk about in the current market because it's very specific to, it can be specific to a few things. It can be specific to the seller. It can be specific to the property. And it can be specific to the market that that property is in. And probably when we are having that discussion, a combination of all three comes into play when we decide which route we're going to take when it comes to pricing.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most important parts of that conversation is the education component that we're providing along with the talk and along with the number in the particular price silo we're talking about, because we see this all the time. People have a number in their head, okay, but it's not based on anything other than, well, that house sold for this 6 years ago and my house is much nicer.
Well, I think, and you and I chatted about this maybe a few days ago, where we had a real big peak in the market in early 2022, and that was just 2.5 years ago. And how many sellers are stuck on the fact that a home like theirs sold for 20% more at that time, and now they're trying to catch up to that, but the market is just not there, right?
And you know, if they're not stuck on that, it's always referenced.
Yes.
It's always referenced. You know?
And what I remind them of is looking at today's valuation on their property. If you bought it 5, 6, 7, 10, whatever years ago, your rate of return on an annualized average is still pretty good. And all right, so let's get into the 3 different price strategies.
Sure.
So strategy number 1 is pricing it below market value. And I threw out this number the other day to you, and you thought I might even be light. If you were going to take this approach, that it would be roughly 10% below its market value. So if you had $1 million home, your price below market value would be about $900,000. Maybe it could be a 15% variance, so you're at $850,000. So let's say you're taking this home that has perceived market value, because that's all opinion.
Yep.
Perceived
it's worth
market
what
value.
Somebody's going to pay for it.
It's only worth as much as somebody's going to pay for it. That's right. $1 million home, it's listed for $850,000. Pros and cons of doing that. Why would you?
You're going to drive a lot of people to the home, especially if they realize it's underpriced.
Opens up that audience.
Yep. You get lots and lots of exposure. With that exposure, you get a lot of, as we've called them, tire kickers. Okay,
Sure.
Like a lot of people that are not overly serious, but you know, depending on the market, you could also potentially get multiple offers. Okay, which is a big part of that strategy, hopefully, to drive that number up. If you could play offers off each other.
Ideally, in that strategy, you probably have set a certain date and time to accept offers. And with that strategy, if you're listed at $850,000, you know the home's worth $1 million. You really don't care if you have offers at $850,000, $900,000, $950,000. Your goal is to get multiple offers, and hopefully somebody fell in love with the house enough to drive their price up.
For sure. And I mean, something we've also seen, you know, you set an offer night, but if a home is priced low enough or perceived low enough, you know, you get that interest very, very quickly that potentially drives offers before your offer night. Okay. And, you know, people coming in really, really quickly because they know it's a deal. And then you get multiples that way, which provides you even more leverage, you know, if it is that exciting of a property.
So where would you use this option right now in this market?
Right now in this market, I typically wouldn't. You know, thinking about my seller's situation, if this was we really have to sell, possibly I would. If there was a lot of inventory and, your house is potentially viewed as a commodity, I might, just to get ahead or get exposure outside of where everybody else is being lumped. Or if you want a quick sale.
I think the biggest thing to realize with that strategy right now in this market would be asking the question, are there enough buyers out there to yield multiple offers, to yield a higher return? And with so many listings, so many options right now on the market, would you potentially get lost in the shuffle?
And that's a component it's very good to bring up, because it's been part of probably the last year listing conversations that I've had. Activity. And you're not just looking at what's sold on MLS. You're looking at who's out showing houses, what kind of interest in there is in houses. And I mean, that's one of the great things of being on a team. At any given time, we have kind of multiple properties available. So we have our own internal gauge that we can see what's happening. But the data is there as well.
Every week I analyze the showings to see the progress of our listings and where are the showings coming from? When are they coming in? How many are there? And it's pretty mind-blowing to relate the statistics from showings to the end result of the sale. And of course, that's the market we're in now, where there's a higher amount of inventory available, fewer showings, hence the longer days on market, which has been hovering around that 30-day mark, give or take. So, all right. So that's option number one, is price it below market value, 10 to 15% below its perceived market value. You're setting a date and time to review offers, and you're hoping to get multiple interest. But seller beware right now, because you are in a buyer's market. It's sort of balanced, but it's
definitely leaning towards buyer. Yeah, for sure.
That might shift over the coming months, but as of right now, unless you have a property that would appeal to a huge audience that's not available anywhere else, like I'll give you an example. Yeah. There's always a street or two and I won't mention any names because you live on one of them, but a street or two in every town,
in every neighborhood,
where there's not much turnover. People live there for years and years. All the neighbors love each other. They're all barbecuing together and blah, 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 street parties and kumbaya. And then us as realtors, when we're working with clients, we always hear, oh yeah, we love that street. Oh yeah, we love that street. So there are those kind of exceptions where if there's no other homes on that street available, nothing has been on the market for the whole year sometimes on those streets, and then one pops up. All you need is 3 or 4 of those very interested buyers because you've got that hot commodity. But in typical current climate, just make sure you're doing your due diligence that that's the right approach. What I've seen is some out-of-town agents selling a property which they don't have their finger on the pulse of that market. They don't have that intimate knowledge, and they just present this as an option. And they think it's a good option, and they sell it as we're going to get multiple offers on this to the seller, and the seller has false expectations.
It's funny you bring that up, because initial conversations, even before you're doing your listing conversation, everybody wants to multiple offers always comes up. It always comes up to
who doesn't want multiple offers? Who doesn't want to sell over asking?
To the seller. But to your last point, I think it is so important when you're providing these 3 price options to also put them in context. They don't operate independently. There has to be certain market forces. There has to be certain inventories at play for these to be effective strategies.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Option number 2.
At market value.
At market value with I say a 1 to 2% variance in either direction. So if you have a $1 million home, it's pricing it at $990,000, $980,000, all the way to $1,010,000, $1,020,000, give or take, right? Benefits of going down that route?
It rides the market. Okay, so it's going to provide. It's going to be on probably a little bit longer, but you'll get people that are serious. You won't get the bottom feeders, as I call them, looking for a deal because it's been priced well. It's going to be consistent with what's out there.
Now, I will say, it depends how you present your home.
Oh, without
how it's marketed.
Yeah. I mean, that goes without saying.
If you walk into the home and it smells like dog shit, it doesn't matter if you're priced 2% below market value.
Well, if it smells like and looks like dog shit, then you're not at market value. If that's how you're priced, right?
The perception of market value.
Yeah.
Again, only is worth as much as a buyer is willing to pay.
Yeah.
So if your curb appeal is crap, you walk in and all you smell is cat piss. And
despite being the exact same model that sold for this price 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, that reminds me, we did a podcast maybe a couple of years ago, and we had Jen and Tiffany. Do you remember?
Last year. Yeah, I do remember. That was a fun one, actually.
We talked about pets.
And what that does to the value.
And how much it affected the value if it smelled and had presence of pets in it. And everybody's answer was different. Well,
it was funny because just like I did with lower than market value, I thought you were a little light there too, because you said it impacted it about 5%. I think Jen and I said right away, more than that.
Yeah. And again, that's as much as a buyer's willing to pay.
But it taps into that emotion, right? That we quite often talk about. If something is good and makes them feel good, your wallet opens up a little bit as opposed to the opposite.
We don't see it as much in our market because we deal a lot in urban areas. But as an example, and you might know this from your course of owning a cottage, rural and cottage industry is very different in the sense that people overlook certain things to either get the location or get their hands on a property itself or whatever. So as an example, talking cottage, because I went through this with our cottage, if you love the lakefront, you love the lake, there's nothing else for sale, you overlook the fact that you saw mold or rat shit or whatever.
Well, it's funny you say that because when we earlier this year sold our cottage, and one of the showings that we had was a person from a city, looking to move out to the cottage, and they clearly hadn't educated themselves on those intangible things like the smells and the differences. And I think at one point there was something that was brought up by the cooperating agent, and my agent just said, it's a fucking cottage, so I mean, you are going to get a different smell. If you're in the middle of a forest, you are going to get the odd ant or spider crawling through.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you don't like it, it's a cottage.
Yeah.
So yeah, to your point, great point.
So my perception when we talk about, or my definition, I should say, when we talk about that second option, pricing it to market with a 1 to 2% variance, that 1 to 2% variance I talk about a lot with my sellers because, again, if the home is worth $1 million and you price it at $980,000, you're making it super attractive. If $1 million is fair value and you're priced at $980,000, you're really enforcing the fact that, hey, this is nice value for you. And you encourage that showing maybe a little bit quicker. You encourage that offer maybe a little bit quicker. Maybe it does that to multiple interested buyers. So now you're encouraging potentially multiple offers without severely underpricing the home. And the other aspect of or on the flip side, if you're 1 to 2% above its market value, in this case, you're talking $10,000, $20,000. It's not going to price you out of the market. It's still going to be considered pretty fair. And typically a buyer interested will still go and see it, but they just might wait till the weekend versus going to see it on the Wednesday.
There's less urgency.
There's a little bit less urgency in the current market.
Yeah.
In the current market, right? When we're talking lots of inventory, slightly leaning towards a buyer's market. But the key is it's a fair deal for the buyer and the seller.
Mm-hmm.
You're selling it. You're selling. Everybody feels good. You're buying it for what it's worth. You're selling it for what it's worth. Everybody's happy. All right. My favorite one, Steve, Mine third too. Approach.
Overpricing.
Pricing it over the market value. What we used to call the needle in the haystack approach.
Mm-hmm.
As a percentage, how much above market value would you say would define that third strategy?
On
3%,
$1 million?
5%?
On $1 million, just to keep the math simple, I'd say between 5 and 7.
Between 5 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're $1 million valuation and you're priced at $1,059,900, you're overpriced.
Yes.
If you're priced at $1,099,000, you're definitely
way overpriced.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Sure.
Because there are very strategic times where you might be using that option.
Mm-hmm.
When would you use it?
Couple times come to mind. Number one is if you have a house that is a showpiece. Okay, so it is it does stand out from the other houses in the neighborhood, finishes, updates, something that could very quickly create that emotion with someone who would be willing to maybe pay a little bit more than market value to get themselves into that turnkey home. Number one. Number two, if there isn't urgency to sell the home and it's casting a line in the water. Okay, it's all right, and you see that sometimes with listings, and I mean some of the listings that do it, you wonder why, where they're priced a certain way for 2 weeks and then they adjust. Okay, and I think that's a testing the waters type thing. Is there that buyer for this house, this type of home?
I would say to elaborate on that, the only time I'm a fan of that strategy is when you have a unique offering where you could put 10 realtors in the room and try and evaluate that property, and everybody might have a different answer. It has to be something that isn't readily replaceable in the market. So as an example, my home, it's built by Mattamy Homes. Mattamy probably built 200 of them in Milton. There's one for sale probably every week or two. Very replaceable. Now, of course, depending on the finishes, if I have a beautiful pie-shaped lot, which I wish I did, and a pool and all that, that might change the landscape of it, but you get the drift. If it's a replaceable home, it's not something unique. It's really tough to sell under that strategy. Some sellers are stubborn. Some sellers want to...
They have a number.
Yeah. How many times have we heard that, right? We got a number and...
I'm not selling if I don't get this.
Right.
Yeah.
So try it if you want, but you need to change that strategy in 2 to 3 weeks. Otherwise, you're dead.
Yeah.
And you will end up selling for less than you would have had you had priced it properly to begin with, because the longer you're on the market, you're going to have a savvy buyer representative approach you with a lowball offer and beat you up on price and start negotiating.
And I've often said that during the listing conversation we were talking about, you have to be very careful, in particular with the overpriced strategy in a balanced, slanted towards buyer market. Longer you're sitting, the more negotiating power your buyer is going to potentially have, and the closer you're going to get to that hard deadline where you have to sell. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I get it. You got 6 months, but be mindful, be very, very mindful, because nobody knows what's going to happen down the road.
And again, if you are using that strategy, well, it's really regardless what strategy you're using, the home's got to show well.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And when I meet with buyers and sellers right now, and they're talking to me about all the listings that are on the market, I challenge them and I say, yeah, but look at the listings.
Yeah.
Look at the inside of those homes. Look at the outside of those homes. Look at the photos. Look at the price compared to what's been selling. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of trash out there. So I don't put a lot of weight into the number of listings that are out there, because a lot of them are just dreamers.
And I've often wondered, I just went through this with a house I have on the market. Some of the pricing, homes in the same street, comparable homes in the same neighborhood, I'd love to just sit with particular realtors and say, tell me your thought process here, because I don't get it. Like I'm
quite honestly, I think there's no thought process. A lot of the time it's whatever they do. Yeah. Got to do to get the deal.
I can be,
to get the listing,
buying the listing. I can be as creative as the next guy, but sometimes you're just like, where the hell did that come from? Yeah,
I ask that sometimes after showing a property, and
help me get to your number.
Yeah, can you help me understand what did you use in your market analysis that made you arrive at that number? And oftentimes, I would say 95 times out of 100, I will get the answer, well, that's what the seller is hoping to get, or that's what the seller wants. Well, that's what the seller wants. Sure, the seller, I'd want $2 million for my home, but it's only worth 1.5. So, anyway.
Yeah.
So those are the three options: below market value, at market value, and above market value. As simple as that sounds, it's very complex. Very complex in how we arrive at that.
There's a lot of thought that goes behind a number we suggest.
And you are often a resource to me and vice versa. We use our team resources to chat this out sometimes and get second eyes on things, get opinions.
And that's such a valuable process that I speak to clients and potential clients about, because the range sometimes we see in properties, even amongst our team, can be $150,000. And, if you're talking about a $1.2, $1.3 million home, that can be significant. So there's points that come up, discussion points among ourselves in a safe environment that is way better than when you go live.
Sure.
And you're trying to, put out fires or justify things in a hostile environment.
You're pre-testing the market, essentially.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
And the flip has happened too, Steve, where we've sat around had that group chat about a specific property, and we've all come within
sure.
like a very minuscule amount. And then we know, okay, we're bang on.
We're good.
Yeah, we're
for
good.
Sure. I agree.
Anyway, folks, if you are thinking of listing your property in a week, in a month, in a year, 10 years from now, whatever, and you want more insight as to how we might recommend pricing your property, we do offer free consultations on our team, free conversations. So having Steve or one of our other colleagues come to your home and let you know exactly what it's worth. There's no obligation. We'll us
even
a
bring
comment.
Coffee and treats.
Even bring something to sit there and have that chat with you. No coffee, tea, Steve.
We'll break bread, whatever. Yeah.
Break bread together.
There you go. That's your term.
All right. Thanks. We'll see you next week.
Awesome.
As always, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. If you've got a property and you're wondering what it might be worth or what strategy is best for you, leave us a comment or send us a DM. We'll reach out. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.